Well guys, I hate having to say this again, but I was once again left feeling unsure of how to feel about the episode in front of me, which in this case is of course episode 89. I said and felt the same thing for the previous episode, episode 88, and now here I am once more with the same song and dance, though naturally I have different things to praise and gripe about because it's not the same episode. There's a lot to love about this episode, such as Lucius and Gibeon's departure, which I saw coming a mile away, and I'm sure most if not all of you did as well. Now this is something I love in that it's something worth praising as a significant moment with lots of meaning narratively and in terms of character. I do not mean I love it in that I like that it happened, because obviously I didn't. I didn't want this to happen. I wanted both of them to live on. Lucius deserved to spend more time with his Pokemon, his descendants, and his friends, old and new. There was so much I wanted him to do and see. Gibeon meanwhile deserved to have the chance to right his wrongs, to atone for the things he did and said, to find a way, a better, more positive way, to achieve his goal of improving the lives of both Pokemon and humans. And I would have loved to see him reunite and reconcile with Zygarde and reconcile with his son-in-law as well, but unfortunately none of this was meant to be. Instead, following Pagogo's successful purification of Lacuium, Lucius and Gibeon begin to disappear. Thankfully though, they have just enough time to bid farewell. Lucius says goodbye to Pagogo, to his Pokemon, and to Liko and company, who are of course sad to see him go, prompting him to say that he fulfilled his final task, conveying the intentions of the shiny dragons and ensuring the purification of Lacuium. He also tells Liko to keep taking care of Pagogo. Gibeon meanwhile tells Amethio to follow his own path, his own beliefs, alongside Ceruledge, signaling that he does entrust them with accomplishing what he couldn't, following Amethio's declaration to do so via a more positive way that he will look for. Surprisingly, I wasn't as sad as I thought I'd be. It's not easy to make me cry, but it's also not difficult. Push the right buttons, which is to say the right characters, the right music, the right story, the right dialogue, the right moment, situation, circumstance, etc., and I will break down. Plenty of anime have managed to do this, even Pokemon. Though granted, I was quite young when I saw most of the Pokemon anime moments that made me cry, such as when I watched Mewtwo Strikes Back for the first time in theaters back when it released. But anyways, the point is that I fully expected to at least tear up, but I didn't, not even close. Now, is this because it wasn't sad? No. I think it has more to do with the fact that it feels like they didn't really aim to make this be overly emotional or depressing. Instead, they had this play more like a passing of the torch. Lucius and Gibeon are gone for good, sure, but their descendants will carry on their wills. They are the successors of everything Lucius and Gibeon stood for, fought for, and aimed for. Something illustrated beautifully here. So they are not really feeling regretful as they vanish. If anything, they feel hopeful and satisfied knowing that they finally got to settle their differences, they got to reconcile, and they were able to bring matters to a happy end. In fact, they are clearly smiling as they disappear, so obviously they are not unhappy. Better yet, thanks to Lucius, Gibeon realizes, just as he was lamenting the fact that Zygarde, his own partner, left him, which he takes as a sign that perhaps he never had the right to speak of the future of Pokemon and humans, that as a scientist, he always aimed to bring happiness to people and Pokemon, which is why Zygarde, the overseer of the ecosystem who had the same goal, chose him as its partner, meaning that Zygarde understood him. While this realization does deepen Gibeon's despair since it confirms just how far he strayed from his ideals and the severity of his sins, it also provides a faint glimmer of hope, because he now knows that he was once someone worthy, someone righteous, a genuinely good person with genuinely good intentions. He might have ended on the wrong path, but he started on the right one. So maybe, just maybe, he can find his way back someday. He is not a lost cause. Redemption is very much possible for him. This clearly grants him solace. It removes a weight off his shoulders, which is largely to blame for why he looks this happy and satisfied as he vanishes. Moreover, the fact that Lucius says that Bristol is waiting for them and that their adventure is not over yet does make their departure even less sad. After all, reuniting with a dear companion and getting to pick up where they left off with their journey together cannot be anything but joyful, even if it does bring up the question of where exactly is Risto waiting for them and where exactly are they going to resume their adventure. I guess maybe in the afterlife, in heaven, somewhere like this, or maybe they will reincarnate in another world or something. In any case, knowing what awaits them makes their final steps feel less like an end and more like a new beginning, which again makes their passing less sad. Though I must say that it's a shame and a missed opportunity that Risto did not show up here. It would have elevated this moment greatly, both in terms of emotion and in terms of the narrative. Now, emphasis on less sad. Like I alluded to earlier, this is still sad, especially when you see things like Pagogo slipping through Lucius's arms because he is no longer corporeal, and Gibeon showing affection for Amethio for the first time, at least on screen, by going for a loving touch that ends up being symbolic, since he is also not corporeal anymore. These are subtle but powerful ways of elevating the sadness of the moment without making it feel overwhelming, allowing the scene to feel bittersweet rather than purely tragic, which also preserves the intent to make this be a hopeful farewell instead of a sad one. Also, it's worth highlighting that while we never had reason to believe that Gibeon didn't love his grandson, he never showed it either. Therefore, seeing him finally do so, and in such a gentle, tender way at that, is quite heartwarming. In this moment, they are no longer a villainous leader and his subordinate, but a grandfather and his grandson instead. Moreover, this moment is perhaps the clearest sign that Gibeon has turned over a new leaf and begun his redemption arc. It's such a small gesture, yet so telling. Simply wonderful. All in all, as usual, the magnificent storytelling and writing of this series shine through, delivering yet another thoroughly masterful and supremely fantastic bit of dialogue and character work that are simply delightful and wonderful to witness, ensuring that our last moments with Lucius and Gibeon are heartfelt, meaningful, and beautifully memorable, as well as the best part of this episode by far. Now, that's not to say that there isn't plenty to love about the rest of the episode, though there's also quite a bit to criticize. You'd think that with the loss of their leader, the explorers would fall into disarray, but instead, Spinel, who was already a contender for the title of main antagonist, steps forward, now fully claiming the throne. With Gibeon gone, Spinel doesn't just aim to succeed him, he vows to surpass him. This declaration isn't just bold, it aligns perfectly with the villain he's always been becoming. Throughout the series, Spinel has stood out not just for the many despicable acts he's committed, but also for the sheer intensity of his ambition. Twisted, obsessive, and unrelenting, his thirst for power knows no limits. No method was ever too cruel, no tactic too vile, so long as it furthered his ends. Even his fellow explorers were expendable, mere pieces on the board of his master plan. From the start, his actions were always steeped in calculated malice, and his schemes to stop Liko and her friends were nothing short of evil. This evolution from dangerous subordinate to self-proclaimed successor feels less like a sudden shift and more like the natural culmination of a villain who was always waiting in the wings, ready to seize absolute power and control the moment the opportunity arose. Another fantastic showcase of the superb writing and character work in this series. Spinel already had the potential to rank among the best villains in the history of this anime, but now, with Gibeon gone and nothing holding him back, that potential is on the verge of leading him towards becoming the very best Pokemon villain like no one ever was. There is, however, one thing from everything he says that I find very peculiar. He says while sounding disappointed, in fact he even says how disappointing that he thought he would be the one to inherit Gibeon's will, but instead Amethio did. This statement forces me to reevaluate Spinel once more. See, I used to think that he was genuinely loyal to Gibeon, that he admired and respected him, so much so that he wanted to be his heir, which was always supposed to be Amethio. This is part of the reason why Spinel could never stand him. He was jealous, envious because Amethio had the privilege, the position he wanted. Hence why Spinel went to such lengths to get Amethio kicked out of the Explorers. With him out of the picture, Spinel could take his place as successor to Gibeon. However, the revelation that he was potentially aiming to betray Gibeon for his own gains went against this perception I had of him, painting him instead as someone that never respected or admired Gibeon, someone who was never loyal to him. Rather, he pretended to be loyal to him. He pretended to respect and admire him, also that he could earn his trust, aiming to one day leverage said trust in order to stab him in the back. However, episodes 86, 87, and 88 came and went, and not once did Spinel ever attempt to betray Gibeon, nor did he ever voice the intention to do so. He never showed his supposed true colors. Instead, he remained firmly on Gibeon's side until the very end, even though he looked clearly disappointed when Gibeon lost and then had a change of heart. I fully expected Spinel to say something about this before or after Gibeon's disappearance. Something like, "You've let me down, Master Gibeon. I can't believe I pretended to be loyal to you thinking that you would actually lead me to what I want. What a disappointment you are. An utter failure." etc. How many treacherous henchmen have we seen in fiction that take advantage of a moment of weakness from the head honcho to make their move, kicking them while they're down to seize power? But Spinnel didn't do this, nor did he do another classic staple of the treacherous henchman playbook: kicking, stepping on, or spitting on, etc. the lifeless body of their former superior, while looking and sounding disgusted and disgruntled, clearly expressing their dissatisfaction and disappointment towards the person they once pretended to be loyal to. The fact that Spinel did not do either of these things makes you wonder if he truly intended to betray Gibeon. In fact, he even straight up says that Gibeon had his wholehearted respect. So it seems Amethio was wrong about him while I was right about him. His loyalty and respect for Gibeon suggest that Spinel hasn't completely discarded his humanity. He is capable of harboring positive feelings towards others. Not everyone is just a tool for him to exploit. This adds extra layers to his character, making him even more compelling, interesting, and well written. Now, speaking of questioning the loyalty of members of the Explorers, Spinel is not the only one who gives us reason to wonder about where their allegiances truly lie. When Spinel reveals that he is not going to back down by exposing the heroes to Laqueum, which makes them go berserk, Coral and the Sidian both call him out for this, while clearly looking shocked. Now, do they just think that with Gibeon gone and their plans foiled, there is no point in continuing to fight Liko and company, or could they perhaps have some personal issues with Spinel, which is to say, they don't fully trust him or see eye to eye with him? I'm leaning more towards the latter, since this isn't the first time they go against him. Just a few episodes ago, they wanted to bring Amethio along for the final battle, even though he was removed from duty. Whether this was done out of solidarity with their colleague or out of disagreement with Spinel is anyone's guess at this point. But it's possible that Coral and the Sidian are not all bad. They're certainly not fully on Spinel's side or willing to let him call the shots. Unlike Chelsea, who always sides with him, even telling them here to let him cook. Now, could this discord lead to a falling out within the Explorers later on? Perhaps. But going back to the heroes, before they go on their Laqueum Field rampage, they do become wild Pokemon since their trainer Lucius is now gone for good. This is why their Pokeballs end up open and empty, something I wondered about in the preview for this episode. Them being wild now means that Liko and friends could catch them for real, but that of course won't happen anytime soon since their rampage tears Laqua apart, forcing Liko and company and Amethio and company to flee the scene. Though they only managed to escape because Rayquaza, who was the only one unaffected by Laqueum, makes a heroic intervention and then chooses valiantly to stay behind to keep its peers at bay. So, after 70 plus episodes of chasing the heroes and the many trials and tribulations required to get them to join the team, Liko and company are forced to just leave them behind after they were forcefully released. While I understand the very valid circumstances that led to this outcome, I still hate to see such a huge and integral part of this series being undone in just a couple of minutes. Like, what was the point of going through so much to get the heroes only to have them be forsaken like this? I get that they did do their job of helping Liko and company get this far and of helping Pagogol purify Laqueum, but still, this just feels like a terrible waste. Though as we find out later, they are not gone for good since Spinel somehow ends up managing to capture all of them except Rayquaza. So clearly the heroes will still be relevant going forward, meaning that their fate is not as bad as it initially appears to be. Though I still take issue with it. I also take issue with the fact that as Liko and company make their escape, Liko unfortunately loses Lucius's belt along with his journal, the pictures within, and the ancient Pokeballs, which is simply heartbreaking. It wasn't enough to have Lucius banished forever and to have his Pokemon be released and left behind. They also had to ensure that even what little he left behind in terms of physical evidence that he existed ended up lost as well, potentially for good, severely impacting his legacy. Though of course, like Fried says, the story of Lucius will live on for as long as they remember it. Which yeah, is a powerful and poetic quote, but it feels like a hollow consolation in the face of everything that was lost. Which is a shame. I get that this episode marks the end of an arc in a chapter, but this doesn't mean that so much from them needs to be discarded, which lessens some of their overall value and importance. And as if this episode didn't have enough casualties, there is one, or rather two more, we must discuss. Following an intense and desperate attempt to escape the collapse of Laqua that culminates with Orla and the rest of the Rising Bolt Tacklers coming to the rescue with a powered-up Brave Olivine courtesy of the red button they have been teasing for a while, Fried and Charizard end up falling off the airship to their apparent demise. A moment that is both shocking and painful to see. Now, are they really gone for good? I seriously doubt it, and I am not alone in feeling this way. However, I think it's safe to say that we won't be seeing them again for a while. Honestly, while I hate to see this happen to Fried and Charizard, since I do like them, I do give props to the series and the writers for having the guts to seemingly kill off such important characters. The final thing I want to bring up is the fact that I'm a little disappointed with the Brave Olivine's transformation, mostly because I expected something more epic. Not that going from an airship to a rocket ship is not epic, it's just that what I had in mind was so much cooler. Again, as usual, I sell myself on a vision that doesn't quite come to pass, which leaves me feeling disappointed, even if only a little. Now yes, there is still much more to discuss about this episode since it doesn't end with Fried and Charizard's apparent demise. Instead, it ends with a 1-year time skip, a look at some of the things that happened during that gap, and with setup for the next arc. There is obviously a lot to say about all of this and the trailer for said new arc that plays afterwards, but I won't do that here since I already did so in a video I made a couple of weeks ago. Please do check it out because honestly, it's part of my overall review of this episode. There will be links to it in the description below and at the end of this video. So overall, this episode was pretty good, though once again, I find myself walking away from an episode with mixed feelings. Impressed by the writing, invested in the characters, but not fully satisfied with the overall impact and outcome. Episode 89 delivered a farewell, a closing that was more beautiful than heartbreaking, more hopeful than tragic, and while I like a lot of what happened in it, I also feel that it could have been a better episode overall. Especially considering that it's the finale of both an arc and a chapter. It falls a tad bit short of the epic, unforgettable, and monumental conclusion it should have been and that it needed to be. Still, Lucius and Gibeon's final moments were undeniably powerful. Spinel's rise is very compelling, and the story marches on with intrigue, purpose, and still a lot of unanswered questions. There's undeniably a lot to praise, but also a fair bit to critique and plenty to reflect on, like the fate of several key characters. At the end of the day though, that's part of what makes this series worth watching. It's not just about perfect payoffs or emotional gut punches, it's about the journey, the characters, and the evolving mystery. And with everything this episode sets in motion, it's clear Horizon still has plenty of story left to tell. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, feel free to click the links on screen. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making content like this, you can find ways to do so in the description below. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.